The 2025 season is now halfway complete, and it feels like the one thing that we have definitely not been short on is storylines up and down the grid. I have no doubt that the second half of the season will continue to be just as unpredictable as the first, with so many unknowns. And so with that in mind, let's take a look at all of the drivers under the biggest pressure right now, and the drivers to watch going into the second half of the season. Given the ludicrous discrepancy in how bad Yuki is performing compared to Max, it feels only right to include him on this list. However, it's difficult to judge exactly how much pressure is actually on him, because he is yet another driver in what is a very long list of quality drivers who have all struggled at Red Bull. I think sometimes in the moment, it's easy to forget that Gasly, Albon, Perez, all of these are good drivers who managed to excel before and after their Red Bull experience, and even Yuki, if he is dropped, is no exception. I think it's easy to criticize him now, but even rewinding back to the first two races, had it not been for RB's incompetence on strategy in Australia and his front wing randomly breaking in China, Yuki would have scored points in both of the first two races, including the Chinese sprint. That's what makes it so difficult to judge and criticize Yuki. His results have been totally unacceptable. They have been absolutely awful over the past few races, multiple Q1 eliminations, multiple crashes as well, but we know that this isn't a true reflection of his ability because we have seen this story over and over again. In fairness to Horner, during 2025 so far, the team have never really once blamed or put any real pressure on Yuki, and with Laurent Mekies now joining the team as team principal, he will know more than anyone else the real level that Yuki can deliver at. The thing is that due to his performances, Yuki has to be on this list, but he's just in a bit of a bizarre situation because how much really can we blame the driver given the history of that team? I think Mekies joining the team can only be a good thing for Yuki because there is already a lot of credit in that relationship. However, as with every single Red Bull driver before him, unless changes to the car are made to make it more drivable, which will allow him to extract more results out of his talent, it feels like yet another case of how bad can it really get and for how long before Red Bull feel that their only option is yet another driver change. I feel like it's not been talked about enough because of how many headlines Red Bull are grabbing that Alpine are kind of in a similar situation to Red Bull with their own second driver dilemma. Gasly has scored every single one of the team's points so far. They are also currently last in the Constructors' Championship, and I think it's fair to say that the Doohan-Colapinto swap hasn't exactly been a success. Now, in fairness to Franco, the car has definitely become less competitive relative to when Doohan was there at the beginning of the season, but even so, with Gasly finishing 6th in Silverstone, with Flavio already showing that he's not afraid to chop and change his drivers, and with Franco also having a growing list of spins and crashes, all of that will only continue to put more pressure on him as the season progresses. The Alpine environment is clearly brutal for any driver, especially one that is inexperienced and young. Flavio inherited Doohan for 25, however, Colapinto was his man, and so it was only a matter of time before we saw him in the car. Now, however, despite Franco being Flavio's guy, Flavio has already talked about Franco being dropped, and the rumours of Bottas, who is a multiple-time Grand Prix winner and a very good driver just waiting on the sideline, potentially stepping in to bring some experience and stability into the team, have also not come from nowhere. Right now, Alpine needs points. It doesn't matter how they get them, and it doesn't matter who they get them from. It's as simple as that. I honestly don't think that for Colapinto, just beating Gasly would be enough for him to keep his seat if he is only finishing outside of the points. For Alpine to finish last in the Constructors' Championship for the first time in their history as Team Enstone, that would be an embarrassment for Flavio Briatore. Flavio doesn't have loyalty for anyone if they are under-delivering, as we have already seen this season, and so unless Franco starts to score points with a car which is clearly able to do it in the hands of Gasly, a third driver in that seat with Bottas replacing Colapinto is starting to feel like a matter of when rather than if. And now, some people might think that it's harsh to include Sainz on this list, but I think it's worth remembering the expectations we had coming into 25 compared to how well he's actually performing relative to Albon. In terms of qualifying, the gap has actually been pretty negligible, with Albon having an average starting position of 10.17 and Carlos 11.58. However, in the races, Albon, who deserves a huge amount of credit for surpassing everyone's expectations, has dominated with Sainz scoring just 13 points to Albon's 46, meaning that Sainz has only contributed 22% of the team's total points so far. The only real comparison for Sainz, I think, is Hamilton in terms of how individually they are performing at their brand new teams. And whilst Lewis has finally started to get more on top of the car and has been a lot more competitive in recent races relative to Leclerc, who is a much stronger driver than Albon, Carlos still feels like a driver for whom not everything is clicking as it should. Now, I'm not saying that Sainz is under pressure to lose his seat or something, but we all know how great he can be, and when great drivers start underperforming, that brings with it pressure and criticism, because we have to judge them more harshly than drivers of lesser quality. The only real worry for Sainz is that if Albon keeps outperforming him this year and then also going into next year, then with the momentum and confidence behind Alex, he could establish himself as the outright #1 driver at Williams going forward. And mentally for Carlos, not only will that be difficult to overcome, but it will also start to diminish his standing in Formula 1. By far the most bizarre addition to this list has to be George Russell, because his entire future at Mercedes right now is in the hands of Max Verstappen. Russell has found himself in a ridiculous position of finally getting to Mercedes just as they stopped challenging for championships. He has then spent 4 years establishing himself as the team leader. He is currently dominating his younger teammates, who's essentially been brought in to supersede him at Mercedes. He is also having the best season of his career and is undoubtedly one of the best drivers of the season so far. And despite all of that, he still might lose his seat at the end of the season. The pressure on Russell's shoulders is completely different to everyone else on this list in that there is essentially nothing he can do to drive better than he is right now. It's simply a case of Toto Wolff not having the ultimate trust in Russell to be able to beat Verstappen despite everything that George has shown so far, and so his future is in complete limbo right now. Max is the best driver in the world right now. To me, that is not even an opinion, it's fact. However, it's hard not to feel sorry for George Russell because we don't know whether or not he's good enough to beat Verstappen in a championship fight, because Mercedes and Toto Wolff have consistently failed to even put him in the position to be able to prove himself. And now it's important to remember that neither George nor Kimi Antonelli have a contract for 2026. Given that Antonelli so far has had a mixed rookie season for various reasons, there is definitely the possibility that Toto feels like, given how young Kimi still is right now, that it might not be too bad for his development and also for his potential to demote him to a midfield team for 26, or even give him a sabbatical until more seats open up in 27. That would then leave a space for both Russell and Verstappen at Mercedes, but herein lies the problem that the only driver on the grid that Russell is incompatible to be teammates with just so happens to be Max Verstappen. The situation at Racing Bulls is very simple. Provided that Verstappen stays at Red Bull or that he's replaced by someone outside of the Red Bull program, I think it's safe to say that Yuki will probably still be there next season to maintain some level of continuity. At RB, 17-year-old Arvid Lindblad is the next hot prospect at Red Bull, who not only made his FP1 debut in Silverstone, but I think it's almost certain that he will get a promotion to the junior team in 2026. That theoretically means that there is just one seat remaining at Racing Bulls, and given that the job of that team is to prepare drivers for the Red Bull seat, I really don't see a world in which both Lawson and Hadjar can remain at that team for 26. Ever since Lawson got demoted, I've been saying that to me this season is essentially a shootout for who will stay in the Red Bull program and who will get kicked out to make way for Lindblad. Given that Hadjar has been the rookie of the season and has outperformed Lawson during their time as teammates so far, that puts Liam under massive pressure as to whether or not he'll even be in Formula 1 next season, let alone at RB. The problem that Lawson will face is that even if he starts to outperform Hadjar, he already has that baggage of that disastrous couple of races at Red Bull at the beginning of the season, and for Lawson to be seen as more valuable than Hadjar, he has got to do something extraordinary that will change the perception of him inside the Red Bull program. Having said that, there is also the brand new dynamic of Laurent Mekies being the new team principal, which might play in his favour, But even so, there is no denying that Lawson's future, unless he starts to outperform Hadjar, is looking shaky at best. Well, there you have it. If you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to subscribe. That would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.